There could be more changes coming to the college football playoff. And on today's show, we're talking about what they could mean for Utah. All that and more on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If it's your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. We love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments as well as on social media, where you can follow our show at Locked On Utes on X. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. You can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by friend of the show, Spencer McLaughlin, the host of Locked On College Football. And we had to have Spencer on today to talk about some of the strange changes that could be coming to the future of the college football playoff. And Spencer, whether it's auto bids, 3 of them for just the Big 12 and SEC individually, even 14 teams. I'm
Big
not
12 in the SEC.
Or the Big 10, the Big 12 wishes that they were getting 3 auto bids. You're right. Yeah, the Big 10 and the SEC. I'm not the 14 one. I don't like it, but I'm not crazy. But the biggest thing I hear when I would like for the alarm in my head goes off is the auto bids, because as someone in Utah that I represent here, more auto bids for them, just less spots available. I just feel like it's the next step in trying to squeeze Utah and maybe some of these smaller schools out of. It's funny that we're talking about a Big 12 school as a smaller school, but if you ain't in the Big 10 and the SEC as it currently stands, you're just not in a great spot. So I'm not a fan of these potential changes that could be coming.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's great to be in the ACC or Big 12 right now for this very reason. This is the problem with where college sports are going. Everything is just this massive consolidation, and it's so messed up because, you know, you're going to have Vanderbilt and Illinois and Northwestern and Indiana have, you know, better financial situations than Utah or Kansas State or, you know, whoever may get left behind in the ACC. We don't know how those lawsuits are going to shake out. So I think that it's just kind of the realization of a fear, of a generalized notion, which is everything's trending towards Big 10 and SEC dominance. And guess what? You can't do anything about it. There's nothing anyone can do. If the Big 10 and SEC say, we want 6 auto bids in a 14-team playoff, if they say we want 8 auto bids in a 14-team playoff, what are you going to do if you're the Big 12 or the ACC? Because right now, what you have to preserve if you are the ACC or the Big 12 is the Big 10 and SEC breaking away entirely and trying to form a super league of college football in which they play for their own championship and don't even include you, right? Or, you know, breaking away from the NCAA entirely and then saying, you know, we're just going to play amongst ourselves over here, which would be dumb. It'd be stupid. It'd be really, really awful for college sports in a number of ways. And look, I don't love the structure. We've definitely exacerbated the haves versus have-nots conversation, but part of what makes college sports fun and exciting is every now and then one of those have-nots beats one of those haves. I mean, on paper, NC State men's basketball shouldn't be able to beat Duke, but guess what? They did, right? They did, because now that's college basketball, not college football, but still on paper, TCU shouldn't have been able to beat Michigan.
Exactly where I was going to go. Mm-hmm.
Right. And look, they didn't beat Georgia. They got absolutely housed. But guess what? Michigan probably also gets housed. Everybody did. And so I think, I mean, Ohio State played them tight, but Ohio State had CJ Stroud at quarterback and Michigan did not. So that's the difference there. So I think that for the lower 2 conferences that are still at the power level, the Big 12 and the ACC, they're absolutely power leagues right now. But the question is, how do you compete when the financial gap, which was already present, is going to widen over time? And how do you compete when you don't get as many spots into the playoff, which in turn gets more money, which in turn gets more recruits, and so on and so on?
I think what's so disappointing too is you look at like, okay, how do you compete? Well, you have strong brands take out. Like if you're the smaller schools, like how do you just compete with these bigger schools getting more money? You have your strong brands take them out in some way, like beating them in games. Well, Clemson and Florida State, two of the strongest brands, are trying to get into those leagues, as you already mentioned, with them suing them. So that's where that becomes even more of a problem and an issue that unfortunately we're running into here. And you're right that these conferences have all the leverage. Not only, it would be absolutely dumb and stupid if they went off and formed their own thing, but if you're, all these TV partnerships and deals, right? Like they want to be in, like the NCAA, the TV partners would pull out from the NCAA and then go with the other conferences. I don't know how all the legalities of all that works, but like a college football playoff that doesn't have Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Georgia is something that the TV providers, as at least it goes through brokering that with the NCAA, they wouldn't have as much interest in. So that's where that would just fall apart there too. And, even not just the playoff, Spencer, but just as a fan of the sport, 3 auto bids as someone who really enjoys conference championship weekend would take, we're losing the Big Ten and the SEC championship game. I would absolutely hate that. I think it's awful for our sport.
No, I think it's terrible. There are still a lot of the great principles of the sport. You're just making them less. You're making them worse, right? The greatest thing college football has ever had is its regular season, not its postseason structure. And a lot of people would say, well, that's because the postseason always broken. No, it's because the regular season was so great that is now just being diminished. And conference championship weekend, which was a de facto playoff weekend for a lot of teams, is now greatly diminished. And so now you're going to have so many, at least for the Big Ten and SEC, those conference title games, they literally will mean nothing except maybe a bye. And you can, have the same debates you have in the NFL. Would you rather have a bye or would you rather be loose? Would you rather be rested or would you rather be playing hot? I don't know. Like that's just depending on the team and such. But for the Big 12 and the ACC, which will have, maybe 2 right now, I believe the proposal is 3 auto bids each for a 14-team playoff starting in 2026. And then they go to 2 auto bids for the ACC and Big 12. If Florida State and Clemson leave the ACC will be a 1-bid league. And I wonder how many bids they would end up giving the Big 12, because sure, you have some really, really good, solid programs, but in the Big 12, but do you have as many high-end college football programs that command the sort of respect of we need multiple auto bids in here? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Especially if Clemson and Florida State say, go to the Big 10. There's no way that the Big 10 and SEC will look at the structure and say, yeah, the Big 12 should have 1 less bid than this conference over here, the Big 10, that has Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin, Oregon, Washington, USC, Florida State, Clemson. There's no way. That's just not going to happen. And so that's just where, that next sort of move heads towards. And I don't look forward to that particular prospect. Frankly, I hope the ACC wins the lawsuit. I really do. I really do. I hope they win, and Florida State and Clemson have to stay in the ACC. And I understand why, that probably won't happen. And I understand why they want to leave, but I don't want them to. I don't like all of these changes are dumb. There was nothing wrong with college football. People just got greedy, and USC got tired of the Pac-12. Like that is literally the move. And by the way, go back to Texas and Oklahoma. They also got greedy, and they wanted to join the SEC. It's like, guys, what are you doing? And look, aside from my team, Oregon, what teams that have set off all this realignment stuff, I find it hard pressed to do anything but root against them. Yeah, I can think they'll do one thing or the other, but I find it hard pressed to not do that, because Oklahoma's going to go in the Big 12 or go into the SEC. Guess what? Their odds to make the playoff are plus 500. If they were in the Big 12 this year, what would Oklahoma's playoff odds be? Probably plus 150, plus 200. Like, is this really better? But hey, you're lining your pockets. Hope it's worth it, because you're not going to have any sort of success on the field like you would have if you just kept the conferences the way that they should have been all along and that they always were our whole lives.
Yeah, it could diminish their brands too if they're not keeping up that winning tradition. So that's something that'll be interesting to monitor.
How you can get lost in the shuffle. Oklahoma goes into the SEC in the modern era. They're what, the 6th best brand?
Yeah, Nebraska got lost in the shuffle, the Big 10 and everything that happened there.
Texas A&M left the Big 12. Missouri left the Big 12, went to the SEC. How'd it go for you guys? How'd it go? Yeah, good job.
Yeah. A&M still throwing money at people, right? Still trying to figure it out. What's Jimbo Fisher making? Not the coach this year, 74?
Well, he's not this year, but over the course of several years, he'll make $75 million to sit on his butt and go play golf.
It's not a bad deal. Not a bad deal. So that's what all that makes all this realignment crazy is it's driven by the money and everything. And sometimes, and we understand that's what drives a lot of this, but it can lead to some really negative things about it. So the question now becomes what does Utah do with all of this, the ever-changing world? How does all that shape out? That's something we have to talk about in one moment. But first, I want to talk to you all about one of the sponsors of our episode of Locked On Utes, our friends at Gametime. Gametime is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. They have great last minute deals, so many views from your seat that you can look at, all in prices, their low price guarantee. There's so much to love about Gametime because they truly take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. I mentioned the view from my seat. That's a feature I absolutely love. You know exactly what kind of a deal you're getting from Gametime. So you know when you are spending your money, you know you're getting it on a good deal. Gametime is perfect because they offer things like the Gametime ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry. They also have that low price guarantee. Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. That's without even mentioning deals like flash deals and zone deals that allow you to save even more money when you work with Gametime. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. You can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That's capital LONC in Locked On College. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Spencer, you mentioned it, that there's a potential chance that the two SEC and the Big Ten may eventually try to break off. Look, that's where all the money seems to be going, is towards those two conferences right now. We already mentioned Florida State and Clemson would like to get in there. I hope the ACC wins the lawsuit. To your point, it seems unlikely at this moment, just as we've seen a lot of these schools like be able to figure their way out, even though the contract seems like it's pretty ironclad. There's just usually these schools find a way to squeeze out of it like that. So I think the question would then become for Utah is if the Big 12 eventually doesn't become the best option, which it's already not, but like even in a worse spot, if they try to do that, do you think there's a path for Utah success-wise over the next few years to place themselves in a position that it would be attractive to the Big Ten or the SEC? Or do you just think their brand's not in a good enough spot where if the future of college football changes for those conferences, they will be left behind almost no matter what they do?
Well, a couple of things. First, I think the Big Ten is far more likely than the SEC to take Utah. That feels far more Big Ten-ish up there in Salt Lake City than it does SEC. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you might just have to hold out until we get a Power 2 conference situation. And what I mean, but we have a Power 2, a next 2, and then the group of 5. But what I'm saying is Utah might just need to hold out for however many years until the Big Ten and SEC decide, let's just take everybody under our umbrellas and let's just dissolve the ACC name, the Big 12 name, the name, everything like that, right? So when that comes around, there's no way Utah gets left behind. And I cannot see a way in which that happens. But could they try and lobby the Big Ten? Maybe. But what's the timeline there? Hard to say, because the playoff is going to expand in a couple of years. So we've got a 12-team playoff for 2 years. Then we'll have a 14-team playoff for 2031 is, I think, when the proposed deal with ESPN is going to run through. And I think that got finalized recently as well. I know it kind of, it was reported, and then they said, nope, this hasn't been confirmed. And then it came back and it was, around 2031. Early 2030s is when the next round of realignment will get set off. And the question is, will that include the SEC and the Big Ten being expansionary and saying, we just want that team and that team? Or will it them being even more conciliatory towards the rest of college football and say, you know what, let's just build the AFC and NFC of college football. Let's just do that. And then maybe have these regions within these Power 2 conferences. You could play teams that are like kind of close to, you could have some protected rivalries. We could call them like divisions or maybe conferences. And then within those divisions or conferences, you can name them. You could have you could put like 12 teams in the middle of the country, call it the Big 12 or something. You could have a coastal conference on the Atlantic and on the Pacific coast of the country. I'm just spitballing random ideas at this point. So I would just wonder how that all plays out. I don't think Utah has a desire to be in the Big 12 long term because I don't think they even want to be in the Big 12 right now. It's where they have to be.
They were the last one on the lifeboat. It pretty much seemed like them in Arizona State.
Not exactly, because when I think last ones on the lifeboat, I think of that's where Oregon State and Washington State still currently are. Utah got off of the boat, but they weren't. They were saying, "Look, guys, over there's a 40-foot sailboat, and we're sitting here on a 30-foot catamaran. Like, we're fine. We're fine. Like, no, don't go to the. You guys, you went to the 70-foot mega yacht. Oh, come on. Well, now we got to go to the sailboat over here. We can't stay on the catamaran. It's too small, and they're taking a chunk of the boat with it. Oh, goodness. So I don't think that Utah. And then there's the clause that Utah's got with their agreement in the Big 12. Colorado's got a 99-year membership, which, like, what even is that? I don't know. Yeah. But Utah just said, we don't need to be a voting member. We just opt out of that particular clause so that we can, leave whenever we want to. So I think Utah's got an eye on whatever comes next. The question is whether it's one of those two moves or the third option, which would be the Big 12 and the ACC merge to form a super but still third place conference.
That seems like, like I said, it'll be really interesting just to see how the future of all this shapes out. I feel like the power is only going to continue to go to the Big 10 and the SEC. So we're in for a bumpy ride. But would you say catamaran? What is a catamaran? I don't even know what that is.
A catamaran is a boat that doesn't have a hole in the middle. It's like when you go on in Hawaii, if you go on those, if you go on those cruises and you got the net in the front, but it's basically, they're not like pontoons on the sides, but you have basically the whole of the boat is open underneath, and it's all directed towards the sides, and that's how the boat cuts through the water. Whereas like on a regular, if you had like a 60-foot, I was a dockhand many years ago. I've been around boats my whole life.
You also host Locked On Ducks, Oregon in the Big 10, obviously Utah in the Big 12 now. As we kind of mentioned, this is kind of the difference in the things we talked about too. One gets to live with those certain luxuries versus the other as well, like that. But no, I appreciate it.
A standard, 60 or 70, 80 foot yacht, whatever, right? The whole of the boat is just like it's filled out, right? And then it comes to a point up at the bow and then cuts through the water like that. So that's what a catamaran.
I like it. Let me know in the comments if I'm the only one who had no idea what that was. I'll be very interested to keep it. I appreciate the deep reference by Spencer. But speaking of Utah, all the things as you mentioned, if we got to that level of expansion where like everyone kind of got morphed in and the ACC and the Big 12 by name were kind of like Thanos just snapped away basically. If that was the case, it starts with Utah like just having success this year, whatever the future of college football looks like. So you host Locked On College Football. We are currently recording this right before it will be April 1st. But what are your way too early 2024 Utah football thoughts as this team, whatever they want to do? It starts with year one success in the Big 12.
Yeah, I think making the Big 12 title game is a baseline level of success for determining success. If Utah doesn't get to the Big 12 championship game, season's a failure because that means you're not making the playoff. That means you're not close to making the playoff and getting an auto bid from winning the Big 12 title. But, certainly, and
it's really quick. Isn't it funny the difference? Just like the third place Big 10 and SEC team, thankfully no auto bids. I'd be surprised if they weren't in the 12-team playoff. Third place 100%. In the Big 12, they ain't getting in probably.
No, they're not. And look, I've made the argument that the Big 12 and the ACC this year are most likely one bid leagues. I think that's more likely in the Big 12 than it is the ACC. I think if I were to set an over-under at Spencer's Sportsbook of number of Big 12 teams into the playoff, I think that number is 1.5. But I think it'd be 1.5 for both the Big 12 and the ACC, but I would take over in the ACC and under in the Big 12 because I look at the ACC and say, okay, Miami, should have enough composite talent and a quarterback in Cam Ward, who you and I are both very familiar with. They should have the ability to make a push. And Florida State and Clemson, we know that those programs, those coaches, and the teams they're going to have are going to be able to get there. Here's the question with the Big 12. I think an 11-1 Utah team that loses the Big 12 championship game has a chance to make the 12-team playoff. But a 10-3 Utah team that has lost the Big 12 championship game or anybody else in the Big 12, no shot. There is no shot in which a 3-loss Big 12 team, no matter who those 3 losses are, you're not getting into the playoff. That won't happen. But a 2-loss team, you'd have a chance. The problem is, what's better, an 11-2 non-Big 12 champion Utah or a 10-2 no Big 10 title game appearance Oregon? The committee, I bet my bottom dollar, is going to take the Big 10 there. But what do I know?
Would you bet your bottom dollar at Spencer's Sportsbook? On the yacht, too. Maybe on the yacht.
Yeah,
well,
use code FAKE SPORTSBOOK for 20% off.
Yeah. I wish we had a FanDuel read next today, but we actually have another advertisement we're going to be discussing instead. FanDuel will be on the show later this week. I have a crazy Utah men's basketball theory I want to throw at you guys in 1 second. And if you guys do want more of all the craziness that is college football playoff, make sure you guys check out Locked On College Football. Spencer does a great job covering everything. It's our watch next as well, linked to the bottom of this video. But before we talk about the crazy men's basketball for Utah being maybe NC State in the future, I want to talk to you guys about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes. It's our friend at Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug in your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether you're in the opening weekend for baseball, the Final Four coming up this weekend, or you're going to want to have Fire TV for whatever your sports needs or TV needs may be. Fire TV recently created the Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels lets you dive into all of the in-game analysis, the highlights, and so much more, and just keep up to date on all the latest in the worlds of sports, like March Madness, the NBA, MLB, and there's so much more. That's not even mentioning all the great news channels they have, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos too. You can check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this one. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Spencer, you actually referenced it earlier in the show. We just watched NC State men's basketball beat Duke men's basketball in a tournament run that if they didn't win the conference, they wouldn't be in this position. My brother even mentioned to me earlier today, shout out Jack Wistrcill, that if they didn't make a free throw, if Virginia makes a free throw, they're not even in that position. It's like, it's amazing all the little things that didn't work out in their way. And now they just beat Duke and are off to the Final Four. And this is how it relates to Utah men's basketball. There are going to be seasons coming up where it's extremely improbable for Utah to get in and make a run. But the point stands. All you have to do is get in, and if you get hot at the right time, crazy things can happen. We saw Oregon State do it a couple of years ago with an unreal run. Sure, they didn't get all the way to the Final Four, but they would not have made it in unless they had a strong Pac-12 tournament. They were able to do so.
They got to the Elite Eight.
Yeah, they got to the Elite Eight, which was unreal at the time still. So all you got to do is get in, Spencer. That's what Utah needs to do. The next step, just get into the tournament, and any kind of craziness can happen in March, as we've seen yet again this year.
Yeah, I think for Craig Smith, he's got to figure out how to win games in, February. It feels like Utah goes through the non-conference. They look good.
You're right.
League play starts. All right, solid. It's fine. And then February rolls around. It feels like they just, and then just, it all just kind of craters there. And, they've had good players. They've had good teams. And for some reason, they just cannot get into. They were, even amidst several of their late season losses, they were still inside the field of 68 as an at-large team, but they kept on losing. And I think that, what was the record in the final 10 games? To me, it felt like it was 2-8.
Yeah.
So, you can't go that cold down the stretch. So, and you have those ebbs and flows throughout the season. You can have a stretch where you lose 3 or 4 games and still be all right as long as you have quality wins. But, I think for Utah, you're right. You do just have to get in. NC State finished the regular season 17-14. And not only did Virginia miss that free throw, but they came down and banked in a 3 at the buzzer to go to overtime, and then they won in overtime. So
unreal.
I mean, it's the beauty.
Duke, they beat Carolina in the tournament, and it's not even mentioning beating Duke again, as we just saw.
Yeah, like that's complete insanity. Basketball is completely different from football, right? The comparisons
Yeah.
between the two and why you should expand the playoff are so absurd for so many reasons. And we're not going to dive into all of that because I'll take up 3 shows on one show and then Zach will get mad at us for putting out too long of a show. But I think that's our boss, by the way. So who's awesome. I think that for Utah, they've just got to find a way to get it, but just don't have the prolonged cold stretch where it feels like they just can't win a game. And I think if they can avoid that, they've had tournament caliber teams. They just haven't had tournament caliber seasons.
Well, I mean, they're still going in the NIT too. That's where it's like they were really good at home. You mentioned just the losses in February. They've been winning at home a lot. They just can't win on the road. That's why they get to host all these NIT games at home. And here they are in the NIT semifinals going against Indiana State. Everyone's their star. I actually can't remember his actual name. I just forgot it off the top of my head, but he was called Cream Abdul-Jabbar as a joke, and that was the one that stuck out to me. So I think it's Robbie or something like that his name is. So that'll be a fun one on Tuesday. We will dive into that, but it's just about getting in. That's all it is with this tournament, and hopefully Utah is able to do so in the near future. There's going to be lots of craziness to come for the men's basketball program at Utah, just like there's going to be tons of craziness still with college football. So make sure you guys, once again, head over to the Locked On College Football Podcast. Spencer does a great job. You can also give him a follow on Twitter. It's now S. McLaughlin CFP, changing the handle with the new show. We like it there, Spencer.
CFP as in Bravo or football, not football.
Yeah.
just so we're on the same page for those listening on audio. And by the way, to what I referenced, Utah went 4-7 in their final 11 games.
Not good when you're on the, and they were on the bubble. We were in the first 4 in at several instances. I have my father on the show for a reason, who's on the committee. That seems like why would you have your dad on? It's like, no, we were in one point in the bubble conversation. Like, it feels crazy. I feel like it's one of those memes where, you're telling someone, you're like, sure you were, buddy. Like, that's what I feel like they would say about Utah. Like, sure you were on the bubble. It's like, no,
or
losing,
like when you just take a look at their schedule, they were red hot for a while there in the non-conference slate with the win over BYU, but like coming down the stretch, they lose 3 of their final 4 games. Losing one of those games to an Oregon school, can't lose to both Oregon State and Oregon there, right? And they had to look at the buzzer to beat Oregon in the regular season finale. It doesn't fall, but like those are the stretches it feels that make them come up short every year. So they've been a hot starting team, but they've got to be better finishing seasons.
You have to be better finishing seasons. And it's going to be interesting to see what changes for this team going forward as they do try to put themselves in that position soon for the tournament. Spencer, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, anytime, JT.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes, but we got a loaded week. Of course, we'll be diving a lot more into everything going on with spring ball, so make sure you stay up to everything today with Locked On Utes.